Hello, professional fantasy football league players. Welcome to the Stardom Situm Show for Week 6. I'm your host, as always, Josh Marton. Good to be with you. Thank you for listening. On today's show, I've got a quarterback who has a great matchup, good enough to put in my top 10 and put in your lineup. A running back who is replacing an injured running back who I think could start for you. Plus, I've got two wide receivers that if you're desperate, these guys might each get a touchdown this week. On the Situm side, I've got a quarterback who was in the top 5 before the season started, and I'm telling you to bench him this week. A running back who had a great week last week, but should be out of your lineup because of his matchup. And a wide receiver that, unfortunately, is still not quite healthy. But first, let's talk about some bye weeks. This week, just like last week, there's four teams on bye. Chicago, New Orleans, Carolina, and Jacksonville. So if you have players like Jay Cutler, Matt Forte, Brandon Marshall, Michael Bush, Drew Brees, Marcus Colston, Darren Sproles, Pierre Thomas, Jimmy Graham, Cam Newton, Steve Smith, Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams, Blaine Gabbert for some reason, Maurice Jones-Drew, or Justin Blackmon, they should all obviously be on your bench. Now let's get into the guys who are not on a bye this week, shall we? Once again, for the second week in a row, Matt Ryan is my number one quarterback in my rankings. By the way, again, my rankings will be up on the PFFL.com by the time you're listening to this, so you can obviously go there and follow along with them. If you have any questions about guys I don't mention, you can see the rankings, or remember, you can always follow me on Twitter at JoshMartin33 and send me any questions you have there or on the PFFL Facebook page. I'll be answering them all weekend about who you should start and who you should sit. So Matt Ryan is, again, my number one quarterback for this week, just like he was last week, and again, it's matchup based. Basically, every Atlanta player is my number one player at their position. Roddy White, Tony Gonzalez, Michael Turner's in the top 10. We'll get to him later. Oakland's defense is horrible. It's horrible. The Raiders are the worst defense when it comes to every position cumulatively put together in fantasy points against. They're in top 10 against all four positions and top 5 against quarterback and wide receiver. So, here's my point. You're starting all your Falcons, clearly. But Matt Ryan, I think, is going to have the biggest day. So, obviously, if you have Matt Ryan, he's going to be in your lineup. But once again, it's conceivable that you drafted Matt Ryan as well as, say, Michael Vick or Tony Romo or Matthew Stafford. And Matt Ryan needs to be starting over all of those guys. The next guy, Phillip Rivers. I actually put him in the top 5 this week. He's at number 5 in my quarterback rankings. He's playing Denver. He had a big week last week against New Orleans. I think he's going to have a bigger week this week. The Denver defense is a little bit overrated in my mind. I think you're able to throw on them. I also think you could run on them, which is why they're overrated. If you can do those two things, the defense isn't very good, right? So I think Phillip Rivers is going to have a really good day. He's got weapons. Robert Meacham sort of starting to come into his own. Don't know if I'm buying it quite yet, but they're starting to get their chemistry together. Plus, he's got a running game now with Ryan Matthews starting. Malcolm Floyd starting to emerge as the number 1 there. And even though the absence of Antonio Gates continues as far as production, Rivers is overcoming that. And I think he's going to have another big day. Another quarterback who I think needs to be in your lineup this week. No longer a play if you're desperate, or no longer am I telling you to pick him up. He should be on your roster. And if he is this week, you should start him. And that's Christian Ponder. I have him ranked 8th among quarterbacks this week. Playing Washington. Now, I grant you it's in Washington, so it's not at home. But the Redskins are the second worst defense. The Redskins are the second worst defense against quarterbacks. So Christian Ponder needs to be in your lineup. Last guy, remember, at every position, I'll give you someone that if you're desperate, this is the guy you want to play. At quarterback this week, it's Andrew Luck. Going up against the Jets, it's in Indianapolis. The Jets defense, just like the Broncos, overrated. No Darrelle Revis. Andrew Luck's going to be able to throw. He's going to be able to throw well. He looks like a legitimate quarterback, right? I think so. So if you're desperate, you got Drew Brees or Cam Newton or even Jay Cutler. They're on a bye week this week. I think you can go with Andrew Luck and feel pretty good about it. Guys at quarterback that you should sit, Joe Flacco, going up against Dallas. Dallas's defense is the number 1 pass defense in the NFL. Now, that stat is a little bit skewed based off of who they play. And if you remember a couple weeks ago, their last game on the field, Jay Cutler lit them up. But I told you Flacco's a guy that I'm starting to like based on the matchup. On paper, this is not a good matchup. So on paper, I ranked him 15th. I think you can find a better quarterback play than Flacco this week. Speaking of better quarterback plays, the quarterback I told you was in the top 5 before the season started, but now it's probably on your bench, is Matthew Stafford. I have him dropped all the way down to 16 among quarterbacks, and there's a reason. Number 1, the matchup. It's a bad matchup against Philadelphia. That defense is for real. They pressure quarterbacks, and their cornerbacks are able to cover guys. The other reason is Stafford just hasn't clicked yet this year. Believe me, Lions fans sitting right here doing this show for you. I hope it clicks, but it doesn't look like it's going to anytime soon. That offense, I'm hoping on the bye, they reinvented a little bit of it, maybe got some more players involved, do some more creative plays, but I'm not sure yet. I don't think you can risk it. We're in week 6 now. Remember, this is it, halfway through the season. This is where you really have to start making your move. I don't know if you can risk a Matthew Stafford play this week if it might cost you a win. Next guy I think you need to sit is Tony Romo going up against Baltimore. Baltimore's defense, their run defense isn't what it used to be. Their pass defense still is. Ed Reed is still sitting back there waiting. Jimmy Smith looks like he's an all-pro in the making. They still pressure the quarterback up the middle with Haloti Ngata. Ray Lewis still gets to him. Even though they're minus Terrell Suggs, they still can get to the quarterback, and they still play really good on the back end. So I just don't think Tony Romo is worth the play this week. Again, you've got guys that are better than him. I dropped him all the way down to 17. So let's move on to running backs. Guys I think you should start this week. Trent Richardson is the 4th running back in my rankings. Other guys had really bad matchups. Trent Richardson moved all the way up to 4, going up against the Bengals. Richardson looks like the real deal. He looks like he's going to be a stud. And at this point, you're hard-pressed to find a guy who I trust more than Richardson, taking away Foster, Rice, and McCoy. I think Richardson this week, and might be for the rest of the season, a top 5 running back. He's getting the opportunity, and his talent is showcasing what he's able to do with it. At 5, it's Ryan Matthews. Told you last week I was all in on him. I had him ranked 7th last week. I moved him up to 5. He is now getting all the carries. He is showing what he can do with it. He averaged 6 yards a carry last week. Averaged, I think, 8 or 9 yards a catch. So he's getting balls out of the backfield as well, giving you that production. And going up against Denver again, and that's a defense you can run on. That's a team that Matthews is going to be able to make plays against. They're familiar with him. I get it. They faced him twice a year for the last few years, but he's familiar with them. And I think he's back to being a top 5 running back. Next guy is Michael Turner. Now, I have been down on Michael Turner since the year started. However, the matchup this week versus Oakland puts him at number 7 in my rankings. And not only the matchup, but the production. I can't lie about the production anymore. I can't hide it. It's there. This is what Michael Turner is. It doesn't seem to be as fluky as I thought it might be. A couple guys, if you're desperate at running back, Vic Ballard. Donald Brown, it was announced earlier in the week, Donald Brown is out. He had knee surgery. He's out 2 to 3 weeks. Vic Ballard getting the start. Now, I told you last week, I don't really care about depth charts. I don't care who's starting. And that still holds true. But it looks like Ballard's going to get most of the work. And he's going up against a run defense in the Jets that is giving up the 7th most points against running backs in fantasy football. Another guy, if you're desperate, is Kendall Hunter. I have him ranked 32nd in my rankings. So a flex. He's a flex spot, but I think the 49ers are trying to keep Frank Gore healthy for the playoffs. So Kendall Hunter isn't just getting junk time production. He's averaging anywhere from 11 to 15 carries per game. And he's getting a touchdown. He scored in the last 2 weeks. Giants are a team, their defense is pretty good. It's not a great matchup, but Kendall Hunter is going to get some carries, and he should be able to produce a little bit for you. So if you're desperate. Running backs you should put on the bench this week, I got 3 of them for you. Alfred Morris going up against Minnesota. Minnesota's run defense is for real. Ahmad Bradshaw, I've got him at 24th. So still technically a number 2, but there's better guys out there. He's going up against the 49ers. Anytime a running back is playing the 49ers, he's on your bench. And last, Steven Jackson. I got him ranked 28th, going up against the Miami Dolphins. Earlier in the year, it looked like the Dolphins were a good matchup for running backs. They have proved that is not the case. So Steven Jackson needs to be out of your lineup. Moving on to wide receivers. Top 5 guy this week, Demaryius Thomas. I have him ranked 5th. He is starting to get it. It looks like him and Peyton Manning are starting to gel. Peyton Manning is really starting to get readjusted back into the groove of the NFL. Chargers are a defense you can throw on. Look what Drew Brees did against them last week. And Demaryius Thomas is the number 1 there. Vincent Jackson, I have him ranked 10th among wide receivers, going up against the Giants. Going up against the Chiefs. Sorry, read my paper wrong. I do that all the time. Vincent Jackson's going up against the Chiefs. I have him at number 10. The Bucs are coming off a bye where you hope that they were able to get their offense together a little bit, readjust some things, look at the fact that Vincent Jackson's a talent. You need to just throw it up to him. Josh Freeman is getting pressured a lot, but if he has time, Vincent Jackson's going to make plays downfield. Chiefs defense looks pretty good, but I think Vincent Jackson can expose him. Next guy is Deshaun Jackson, ranked 18th, going up against the Lions. Lions secondary is banged up. Louis Delmas looks like he might be back finally, but even if he is, look at Delmas to be up in the box a lot to try and help to stop the running game of LaShawn McCoy, which means Deshaun Jackson will be either single covered or maybe have a safety over the top, but that safety is not going to be any good. So I think Deshaun Jackson needs to be in your lineup this week. Greg Jennings is injured again, which means I'm going to tell you to start James Jones. 2 straight weeks of 2 touchdowns. Once again, can't deny the production. James Jones, I've always said, if he's a guy that gets his head screwed on straight, he's a guy that can be productive in fantasy football. Not sure that's the case quite yet, but it's looking like we're getting there. So James Jones needs to be in your lineup. He's going to get you points this week. A couple guys at wide receiver, if you're desperate. Andrew Hawkins of the Cincinnati Bengals, he is 2nd in the NFL in targets, and he's catching most of those targets. I have him ranked 27th, going up against the Browns. That's an offense that I think can do a lot against the Cleveland Browns. And Santana Moss, I actually have him ranked 35th, so kind of a flex play. Here's the thing. After Robert Griffin III went out last week, Santana Moss had a huge day with Kirk Cousins. What happens a lot of the time when the backup quarterback is taking second-string snaps, the second or third wide receiver on a depth chart becomes the number 1. And the quarterback on the second string tends to get a chemistry with that wide receiver. So if Robert Griffin III doesn't play this week and Kirk Cousins gets the start, look for Santana Moss to have a huge day. And if Robert Griffin III does play, he came out earlier in the week and told the press that he believes he needs to get Santana Moss more involved. So do I, and I think they will. Wide receivers who should be on your bench this week, Andre Johnson. I have him ranked 22nd among wide receivers. Huge drop-off. Going up against the Packers, which on paper looks like a really good matchup. But if you're like me, you're sick of waiting for the production to come around for Andre Johnson. This is becoming an Antonio Gates situation at wide receiver. He's a guy that by name should be in your lineup every week. But you start looking at the production, and it's just not there. So he should be on your bench. Dez Bryant, same story. I have him ranked 24th, going up against that Baltimore defense. There hasn't been enough production for me to justify telling you to start Dez Bryant. Now, has there been a lack of production enough for me to justify telling you to sit him? I could hear either side of that argument. Fair enough. I would say maybe not. But what I'm telling you is you can't count on it. And right now you're getting to a point where you need to be able to put guys in your lineup that you know are going to get you production. Is there ever a guarantee? No, of course not. Fantasy football is a lot like poker. For those of you who play No Limit Texas Hold'em, it's 70% skill, 30% luck. And I believe the same thing in fantasy football. So there's never a guarantee, but you can do as much as you can to help guarantee that you get production. And having Dez Bryant out of your lineup, I think, does that. Next 2 guys, Stevie Johnson and Jeremy Maclin. Both just bad matchups going up against Arizona. Macklin's a pretty good matchup actually against the Lions, but he's just same thing, no production. I have him ranked 30th and 38th, respectively. Hakeem Nicks. I didn't rank him this week, and it's mainly because I don't know if he's fully healthy. He practiced on Thursday. We'll see what he does on Friday. We'll see what he does going into the weekend, what they put his status as, questionable, probable, doubtful, all that stuff. But I didn't rank him, and I don't think you should risk it. I think if you've got a better play at wide receiver, James Jones, Deshaun Jackson, Andrew Hawkins, take it. And the last guy at wide receiver to sit is Nate Burleson. Already told you it's a bad matchup for Stafford. It's a bad matchup for Burleson. If there's any passing for the Lions in this game, it'll be to Calvin Johnson, hopefully. Okay, let's do tight ends really quickly. Guys, you should start. Owen Daniels, I have him ranked 2nd. Kyle Rudolph, I have him ranked 3rd. It's matchup based. Washington gives up the 2nd most points to the tight end, and the Packers just don't play pass defense. And Matt Schaub is targeting Owen Daniels a lot, especially in the red zone. Guy, if you're desperate, Zach Miller. If you listen to the weekly waiver wire show, I told you to pick him up. If you picked him up and you need a tight end because Jimmy Graham is on a bye plus hurt, Greg Olson's on a bye, you can start Zach Miller this week and feel pretty good about the matchup against the Patriots. Guys who should be on your bench, Aaron Hernandez. Reports are coming out that he's questionable. Looks like he might return. Again, don't want to risk it. Plus, it's a bad matchup against the Seahawks. Next guy on your bench, Coby Fleener. Here's the thing about Coby Fleener. Between the 20s, he's getting most of the targets at tight end for the Colts. Once they get into the red zone, though, they're looking at Dwayne Allen a lot. And he's getting the touchdown throws, which you wouldn't think because obviously Fleener and Luck have a rapport going back to college. But right now, Dwayne Allen's getting the touchdown targets. And last but not least, as always, Antonio Gates, unfortunately. Once again, I didn't rank him. Once again, it's a good matchup, but I don't think you should take the risk. I would have Gates on the bench. So that's the show for this week. Remember, follow me on Twitter at JoshMartin33. You can send me any of your Stardom Situm lineup questions over the weekend, whether it's on Twitter or on the Facebook page of the PFFL. I'll answer them all, going up right into the games at 1 o'clock on Sunday. Listen to all the great PFFL Radio Network content we have here. Saturday is the PFFL Live Breaking News show. Make sure you tune into that. See if guys like Hakeem Nicks or Aaron Hernandez are playing. I'm your host, Josh Martin. Keep smiling, keep listening, and always look both ways.